Thanks for tuning in to this special From the Stacks episode of Howe's Things, a podcast and radio show from the David A. Howe Public Library recorded right here in Wellsville, New York. Today, I'm bringing you a special interview that Eric and I originally did for the All the Book Show back in March of 2020. You remember March of 2020, right? Terrible? At the tail end of 2019, I was talking to my friend Michelle Lavoie. Michelle is currently the director of the Olean Public Library, but prior to that had been the director right here in Wellsville and was in fact the director who hired me for my first job here. And so when she moved on to the Olean Public Library, we got to talking about ways that we could come up with some collaborative programming. And we had great success doing author visits here with Joyce Carol Oates and Alexander McCall Smith, Naomi Shihab Nye, and others. And so we thought it would be fun to get an author visit where the author could come to both places. And so Susan Wiggs was one of the names that popped up really early on because, one, as you'll hear in the interview, she grew up in Olean, took cello lessons in Wellsville, and then went on to have this great career as a best-selling novelist. So we thought, well, this would be perfect. So we worked it all out. We reached out to HarperCollins. We got everything set and had planned this great event for National Library Week, which was April of 2020. So obviously that didn't go as planned. And so we thought, well, maybe September 2020, we could do that, for National Library Card Sign-Up Week. We could do it then. And then we were like, maybe 2021, maybe September of 2021. How about 2022? And here we are, 2022. And we're set to have Susan finally make her way here April 8th in Wellsville, April 9th in Olean. So we're really looking forward to it. But I wanted to re-air this interview I did with Susan way back in March when we had just kind of worked out that, okay, this is not going to happen. So throughout the course of the interview, we'll talk about postponing the events and that sort of thing. That's 2020 talk. The event is very much on for April, and you can check with the Olean Public Library or right here at the David A. Howe Public Library for the specifics. But so excited to have Susan Wiggs finally here in person, and I'm excited to re-air this episode so you can hear the conversation we had back then. Susan Wiggs, of course, is the author of more than 50 novels, including the beloved Lakeshore Chronicles series and the New York Times bestsellers The Lost and Found Bookshop, The Oysterville Sewing Circle, and Family Tree. Her award-winning books have been translated into 24 languages. She lives with her husband on an island in Washington State's Puget Sound. Her forthcoming novel, Sugar and Salt, is slated to release this July in 2022. So here it is, my conversation from March 2020 with best-selling author Susan Wiggs.
All the Books presents Author Spotlight.
Susan, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you're doing well over where you are. We're going just a little bit crazy here.
Oh, I can imagine. Oh, my God. Yeah, see, nothing much changes for me and my day-to-day work. I've got to be home alone anyway, but oh, my gosh, it's a different world than when we first set up our library meeting.
I know.
That was disappointing.
I know. I agree. I mean, the plans have been in the works for so long. Here it is, National Library Week, and we were hoping to be doing this in person, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us over the phone anyway.
I know. Well, yeah, thank you. I hope things are getting better out your way. I keep hearing little glimmers of hope here and there out here on the West Coast.
Yeah. New York City's certainly taken a pounding. I mean, I think we're far enough away from that it's difficult, but we're not seeing nearly the problems that, these major metropolitan areas are seeing.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, especially people out here, don't really have much of a concept of New York State.
Yeah.
They're always surprised. They read the books that I wrote with my, upstate New York setting, and they're always very surprised, that it seems there's small towns and little antique villages and farming and wilderness areas, and they're a little mystified by that. You live in a beautiful area. Are you in Wellsville or Olean?
Wellsville, yeah. My library's in Wellsville, and the Olean Public Library is just about 45 minutes away.
I used to go to Wellsville to take a cello lesson when I was little, because I when I was very little, I got pretty good at cello, but the only teacher was a violinist, and so she was like, no, I'm kind of tapped out. You need an actual cellist, and we found one in Wellsville, and I think I did that for maybe a year, and then we moved overseas.
Okay.
That was the end of that.
So about how long were you in this area?
I was born in Olean, and kind of was there in the 60s, and then in 1970 we moved to Brussels, Belgium, overseas for my dad's job.
Oh, wow.
He worked for, it was Clark Brothers, and then it was Dresser, and, went through a lot of different iterations.
Oh, sure.
Home. Yeah, and I think he did work in Wellsville, he worked in Corning on something, but no, we moved overseas when I was about 10 and never came back.
Okay.
And so it kind of gave me a very nostalgic feeling about that area because I didn't have to deal with the snow and the traffic and all that. I just had this kind of magical childhood running around and going sledding and enjoying the lakes and the state parks and everything. And so I have very fond remembrances of that area.
Sure, well...
Especially libraries. I just lived at the library.
Yeah. It seems like with Lakeshore Chronicles and all that it's certainly, the time you were here left a pretty lasting impact.
It did. I kind of borrowed from that and embellished that and made this very, very idyllic fake town. But every once in a while I'll hear from a reader and they'll say, how did you come up with this name? Or, have you really been to Tonawanda? Or, things like that it's always really fun to hear from people who I connect with because I feel so connected to that area.
Sure.
And it's weird that I feel connected to it because I was really only there as a very little kid. But my mom went to Olean High School. My dad's from even smaller town called Portville.
Oh, sure. I know Portville, yeah.
Oh, okay. And my mom went to Geneseo State, and her best friend, they're still best friends, even though they're 90 now, her best friend was a librarian in Brockport.
Oh, really?
I think at the college there. Is there a college there?
Yeah.
Maybe the college is in Rochester. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, her best friend was Ann O'Toole, was the librarian there. And so I feel like they have, their roots there. And so I just feel really connected to that area. So when I decided that I wanted to write a series, the sky's the limit when you make these decisions, but I really wanted to feel like I was part of the landscape there. So it was a real natural choice for me. And then with my more recent book, I actually changed imprints at my publisher. My publisher is HarperCollins, and for a really long time I was writing for the Mira imprint, which was a subsidiary of Harlequin Books, and they were always very romantic books. I wouldn't call them genre romance novels, although I wrote, my share of those, but, my more recent ones were just more, commercial fiction. But when I moved over to the William Morrow imprint and to a new editor, we decided I would focus on these single title books, and that's been so exciting for me, too, because I feel like I get to reinvent the wheel every time I sit down to write.
Yeah. You were saying you were a pretty avid library user as a kid.
Oh, totally. I lived there. I remember overloading. I had a bicycle with a big wire basket in the front, and I remember overloading it so much that I lost control of steering when I would try to ride it home. And the library that I used was walking and biking distance. It was, I think it's still a restaurant or a bed and breakfast for the old library.
Yeah, it's still there, yeah.
That big old Gothic building.
Yeah.
And the library in my Lakeshore Chronicles books is directly, patterned after that. I remember the atrium and the beautiful marble staircase and all that. And so I was actually quite keen to get back there and poke around and, have a look around there. But it looks like maybe we're going to try to take this up again in the fall. That would be great.
Yeah.
Make that work.
Yeah. Well, I think the views would be even better for you in the fall. The leaves changing and everything.
I know. I might even have to bring my husband. He's never been. He's been to New York City a lot.
Sure.
He's a designer, but never to upstate. So he's very intrigued by that area. But yeah, I was a library patron. I still remember my first library card, this pink cardboard with the metal plate.
Yep.
The librarians were just they were so good to me. They always well, you know this as a librarian. Are you a librarian?
Library director, yeah.
There's a fine balance between being a safe, nurturing place for people to read anything they want and steering people towards things that are, that you want them exposed to. And the librarians there were just always amazing.
Well, they're still pretty good. Michelle Lavoie, who's the director there now, we worked together in Wellsville for a while, and now she's over in Olean. So we've been having a good time collaborating on this project together. But yeah, it's still a great place.
I always thought I would be a librarian.
Yeah.
And my goal when I was really little was to be a high school helper.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if use that, but the high school girls would go there and check out books and wheel the cart around, and I was very impressed by that. And that was a big goal of mine.
Okay.
We ended up moving away, and so I never did get to do that. But everywhere I've lived in my life, usually my first stop is at the library.
Smart.
I moved at Bainbridge Island, Washington. Gosh, it's been almost 30 years now. The first thing that I did when I arrived in town is I went straight to the library and got my card. And I thought they'd be all impressed with me here on the island, because by that time I was a published author, and I said, "Oh, I'm a published author," and they said, "Oh, well, here's our directory of published authors."
Oh, wow!
There's like 40 of us.
That's exciting.
To be a place that's popular among writers.
I guess so.
Well, it's very rural and small town out here, but we're just a ferry ride away from downtown Seattle, so it's kind of a pretty ideal place to feel like you're away from it all, but you can get to the city in, a 45-minute ferry ride. Yeah.
In 2019, the American Library Association conference was in Seattle, and I went to that. It was my first time in Washington State, and I had a great time. We went all around exploring, and of course we did the Space Needle and the Pop Culture Museum and all that. So yeah, beautiful area.
Well, the ferries that you see from the downtown, they're either going to Bainbridge Island, where I live, or another town called Bremerton. So
okay.
You probably saw our ferry.
I guess so, yeah.
Very, very picturesque, especially in the summer. Yeah, the library has always been, I guess it's because my mom had 3 kids, and the middle of 3, close in age, and she was always more than happy to, shoo us out the door and send us up to the library. But it's always been a place where I go for business or pleasure now,
Sure.
Yeah, before the internet, I probably spent a third of my writing time in the library physically, because it was all at my fingertips. Now with the internet, I can access a lot more from home, but it didn't used to be that way.
Yeah.
So it's always been like the most important community resource, for sure.
No, I couldn't agree more. So it sounds like you were a pretty early reader, just devouring things quickly. Were you also an early writer? When did you get into that?
I absolutely was. In fact, thanks to my mom, who was a very good mom, I would tell her stories and she would write them down.
Oh, nice.
I would say, "Now write this down." And she saved a few. I have like some scribbles and everything. In fact, I was thinking, if I did a PowerPoint for you guys, I could show you a couple samples that she saved. They're kind of silly, but it gives you a glimpse into somebody's mind. I don't think I ever had a concept that I wasn't a writer. Even before I knew how to write, I would tell stories. I would tell lies. I had a really great third grade teacher in Olean. She taught it was back before the schools had names. So she taught at School 11, and her name was Mrs. Green, Marjorie Green, and she recognized that I was definitely, on the early side of reading and writing. And so she kind of sent me off by myself and said, "Well, you should read these books and you should write books." And I did. Yeah. I just really blossomed under her.
Well, it sounds like you had a great teacher.
I had that teacher that you wish every kid would have. I mean, she had that gift of looking at a kid and seeing what they need and seeing what would help them and mentor them the most. And so, and in fact, she, I probably thought she was ancient when she was my teacher, but after I was an adult and publishing books, every once in a while I'd get a note from her.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, she would read. She was retired, by then, and read my books, and I still could recognize that Palmer method handwriting that I would see from her. But I feel like that whole area is just part of my blood and bone as a writer and a storyteller and a reader too. Yeah, it's going to be very exciting when I finally get to visit everybody in person.
Yeah. Now you said that you always have felt like a writer, but I'm curious, Was there a moment when it sort of snapped into your head that, oh wow, I'm doing this. This is my career. This is my life. Was there a special moment like that?
Yeah, there was actually. That's a really good question. I always wrote, but I also was quite realistic. I always knew that, people don't pay you to be an aspiring writer.
Right.
And so I got a teaching degree, and I got my master's in teaching too. And I was teaching, and I had finished, a couple of novels and got a phone call from an editor. I didn't know the first thing about how you even get published.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not as accessible. That was like 1987 when my first book came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so there wasn't a roadmap like you can find online now to getting published. And so pretty mystified by the whole process, but I did figure out how to send my book manuscript in. It was typed, 500 pages. And I got a call from an editor, and the words came out of her mouth. She said, "We like your book, and we'd like to publish it."
Wow.
And so, 1987. So it's been, 30-something years now, 32 years, 33 years. And I was a very young mom and school teacher and, just barely scraping by. And I certainly did not, get rich overnight,
right.
But it was so... it was so addictive to me. I went to it not like a job, but more like a calling. And so it didn't matter if I had to, teach all day and take care of my daughter the rest of the time, and then stay up past midnight writing. It just was something that I felt really called to do. And I started out writing historical romance novels. Back in the 80s, they were wildly popular with readers.
Yeah.
I loved reading them too. I mean, they got me through graduate school.
Yeah.
And so I was very drawn to that, and eventually kind of morphed into more commercial general fiction. But that was my roots, and it was I never really considered not. And people ask me now, when are you going to retire? And I think, well, what would I do when I retire?
Right.
Would write my novel.
Yeah. That's
what a lot of people want to do. But I have to say, and I would say this to your group, when we meet, one of the things that I think is so compelling about writing is you can come to it at any stage, of your life. I meet people who start out, as writers practically out of the womb like I did, but then I also meet people who are, older people or in the middle of their lives, and they are struck by some inspiration or some compulsion that makes them want to write. And I love that because there's not any rule for that.
Mm-hmm.
None at all. You can pick up your pen and write anytime. And I think it's because everybody is a storyteller. Not everybody's a writer, but we kind of live our lives around stories.
Yeah.
Whether we publish them or
Absolutely.
not.
How do you balance keeping the joy of writing versus, it feeling like work? Because I'm sure there are times, because I know it's hard work.
That's a great question, because there are a lot of things, there are a lot of pieces to writing that are not writing at all.
Yeah.
I like people to think of me as like sitting and, gazing out the window and then being inspired and writing this lovely story. But in fact, there is a lot of heavy lifting that goes into it.
Sure.
And one of the challenging things is I'm like deep in the middle of writing the first draft of a book that won't be out until summer 2021.
Wow. But
I'm obsessed with the story and the characters and everything. But I just finished the Lost and Found bookshop, which will be out in the summer, and I'm having to talk about that and write articles about that and do promotion and publicity on that, which I'm happy to do, but it kind of pulls you in different directions.
Yeah.
So
I
what I usually try to do is I try to keep my writing time in the first half of the day, and then give myself permission to say, okay, switch gears. You can, go do your social media and your email and all your businessy things.
Mm-hmm.
But the joy never leaves of creating, even when I have writer's block. I know that when I have writer's block, I'm just stuck.
Yeah.
And the thing that usually rescues me is I just go read a book.
Yeah.
Somebody else's book.
Well, I picture that being so challenging because you're essentially forced to be creative on a clock.
Totally.
I just think that'd be really difficult.
It can be. It can be. And I do have to say, I'm very much oversimplifying and making it sound a lot simpler than it is. There are times when, it feels like I'm passing a kidney stone or something. It's like, oh my God, I can't get one more word out. And so a lot of that is just timing. And for me, I take about a year to write a book.
Okay.
And that includes like my thinking time and my talking to my editor time and all of that. But I would say at least 2/3 of that year is not writing. It's doing everything else.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings up another question that I have for you here, because you're saying, the time you spend writing it is about a year. Even now, you're, over a year away from when it comes out. And the question I have is, reading the Oysterville Sewing Circle, which our book club has just finished, or well, actually we're wrapping it up now. That is such a topical book, and yet, several years ago,
it wasn't. But while I was writing it, the whole thing started developing and gathering steam, and it was very strange because at first I felt like I was really digging to find information and to figure out what I could present on the page, and is this even believable and everything. And by the time I was, a few months into the writing of the book, it kind of started exploding.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did, I thought that I would be very challenged by trying to find information directly from women who have dealt with domestic abuse and things like that, and they just, oh my gosh, they came like out of the woodwork. I did not have to push very hard at all to get people to level with me about that sort of thing.
Yeah,
it was like things started pouring out of people at a crazy pace.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I was gratified, but on the other hand, I think, God, how long have people been carrying these things around,
Mm-hmm.
and not having that outlet? And so it was very compelling to me to open my email. I protected, of course, everybody's identity,
Sure.
but I got to know certain women really well, and they're not directly represented in the book, but bits and pieces of their experiences are. And I think it made the book seem very layered and enriched by real experiences. And then I have to say, after I published it, it's even now, it's out in paperback now, I hear a lot of feedback, probably more than any book that I've ever written. You always get some reader feedback when a book comes out, but this one, it's almost like they want to talk to me, which I want them to. It's very distracting, but
sure.
They feel like it validates them.
Yeah.
It's not solve their problem or change their life or something like that, but it definitely validates their experience. And so that was a unanticipated consequence of that particular book, and I felt very gratified by it, but also, I hear some troubling things, which, I'm happy to listen to, but I wish that I had more capability to solve them. I can just tell my stories and hope for the best.
Well, the thing is that what I was so intrigued about it is that it feels like it was written as a reaction to what's going on. It feels like it's addressing something that suddenly is so, but it's actually coming out before it, and that's. It's not like powerful men taking advantage of women is something new. You know what I mean? That's biblical. That goes back to the dawn of time.
And again, unanticipated. Nobody thought that was going to start happening, and suddenly it's all in our face.
Yeah. Have you felt like the response has been pretty positive to that? Like it seems to me like it's really adding to the conversation and is encouraging discussions of these kinds of things.
I did have a conversation with my editor and my literary agent, and I said, I don't want to feel like I'm writing to exploit the lived experiences of women.
Right.
And I said, I don't want the book to come off like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were very reassuring, and they said, no, it doesn't feel like that sort of thing where, I scrambled to write something to take advantage of the attention that this is getting, but instead, it's a book that just felt like it was of the moment, as certain books are. Right now, I see a lot of people feeling drawn to the pandemic books.
Yeah.
World War Z.
Yep.
I heard that. Did you hear the interview with him on Fresh Air with Terry Gross?
Max Brooks? No, I haven't.
Oh, I didn't even know. He's Mel Brooks' son.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, we did that book for our Halloween book club last year, so we talked all about it. Yeah.
Okay, well, he had some really, really smart, insightful things to say about why in his book he chose China to be where his fictional virus originated. I don't know, it was a really smart interview. I enjoyed it a lot. And I'm seeing book lists come out saying, here are the pandemic books. And I remember having to read The Plague. I actually read it in French because after we lived in Belgium, then we moved to France. And when I was in high school, I read The Plague in French.
Oh, wow.
It was actually I think it was more of a war novel, but people are coming out with their plague lists. And so I'm wondering, who was in the middle of writing a pandemic book when the pandemic happened, and how is that going to change and shape their experience writing the book?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have visions about Oysterville, because here I am with probably not an almost finished first draft, and then all the reports started coming out, and part of me wanted to close off and still keep writing the vision in my head, but the other part was like, no, I need to listen to this and see, what the world is saying about this situation. So if I was writing a pandemic book, I probably would be like even more glued to the news than I am.
Yeah. No,
Did you get, like, at the library a run on contagion books?
We didn't really, but I mean, we had to close so quickly and unexpectedly that I don't think people really even had a chance.
Yeah.
But you do see like pandemic movies trending, on all the streaming services and all that. So,
So can your patrons like download things?
Oh, yeah.
Borrow things virtually?
Yeah, we have a pretty extensive online collection through the Libby app, is what it's called. Ebooks, audiobooks, music. So that, and when we have seen a pretty large increase since we've been closed down, so we've been doing a lot to direct people towards that, so that people don't miss out on that. And I can tell you, we do have Oysterville Sewing Circle, both an ebook and audiobook out there. So if our listeners want to find it, that's where it's at.
Oh, that's good. Well, thank you for making that available. God, the library is such a lifesaver. And I think particularly with this topic, libraries are they seem to me to be such a safe and respectful place for readers that it feels like a good fit, for somebody who's, if they're actually dealing with that, the library is a good haven for them.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious about Oysterville Sewing Circle. You explore the characters at two different points in their life, and I know that's something you've done in some other books as well. Family Tree comes to mind, for example. What do you find in that helps to flesh those characters out so much? And what's the challenge of writing people at two very different stages in their lives?
You're right. That is a challenge, because I'm always drawn to a character, but one thing that draws me is what is their backstory? What has brought them to this pivotal point in their lives where the story starts? Because you can't write somebody's whole life, but you want to show the defining moments. And so what I usually do when I'm planning a book is I try not to overthink things and overplan things, because I like for the story to unfold as I write it. So I try not to overplan, but I do want to know where it's going. And one of the things that I always need to find out for myself as I'm creating this character is, what is her defining moment? What's that one thing that happens in her life that sets her on this path? Just like me as a little tiny kid, wobbling home on my bicycle with an overloaded basket and telling my mother these stories. So for Caroline in the book, it was, gosh, if I'm remembering, it's been a while since I read the book.
Years, apparently.
Mom sends her to the store to get some sewing notions or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just this emporium, and she's completely mesmerized by it, and it kind of sets her on her path. And so that was her defining moment. And her position in the family. I usually don't write such big families, but I had a lot of reasons for doing that in this book. You know, she's the middle of 5 kids, and so I'm thinking if you're ever going to get lost in a family, that would be the birth position where you could get lost.
Yep. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book you mentioned earlier, of the Lost and Found Bookshop, which is coming out in July, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I was writing that, all of last year, and the reason that I picked that book was I had a couple of themes in mind. One of them was elder care. I've been looking after my elderly parents here on Bainbridge Island. My dad passed away with Parkinson's a few years back, and my mom's still here. She lives in a retirement home just a couple miles away, and so I was dealing with that, and I found that while there's a lot of resources for working mothers and a lot of support and so on for working mothers, it's the working daughters who are very challenging. And I'm talking about the grown women who are looking after, maybe they're looking after their own kids or grandkids or something like that, and their parents. Yeah. And to be called to do that, it's a privilege, but it's also a challenge.
Sure, so, absolutely.
I wanted to incorporate a storyline like that. And I always give the main person in my book always gets like the fantasy job. So that's what, the main people in my books have jobs that I always think that I would love to have or wish that I was good enough to do, like, bookseller, Candlelight Christmas, she was a librarian, because I don't consider myself to have a very interesting job. I'm basically just a reporter, and it's very boring. But no, I try to give the main character, Natalie, in that book, the ultimate fantasy job. And then, of course, I had to throw in some much drama.
Yes.
Yeah, everything, plans change, but I was also thinking, well, it's going to come out in the summer of 2020, and where do I picture my book tour going? And I thought, the Bay Area. I like the Bay Area. And so they seem like random choices, but, I've actually thought about it. So I was writing that last year, and so she has my fantasy job, which is to be a bookseller, and she's got a little piece of my own life, which is elder care, and then she's dealing with a huge tragic shock that happens in her life that kind of sets her on a path. And so that's sort of how I got off and running on that book. And they've just designed the cover. The advanced reading copies are out. And it'll be out on July 7th. And what we're hearing from bookstores and librarians is nobody's planning anything.
Yeah. It's so hard to know. Yeah.
And at a local bookstore that belongs to a friend of mine. Actually, you probably circulate her books. Her name's Susan Wiggs.
Oh, sure.
Selfors, and she's a children's author.
Yep.
Anyway, she bought a bookstore. And so we were going to have this bit. Well, we are. We're going to have a book launch. It might have to be. Hopefully, it won't be virtual by then. So that's happening. But things in the whole world, including the book world, have changed a lot. The way that authors promote and publicize. I'm seeing lots of virtual events and things like that. So fingers crossed that we keep our readers engaged.
Yeah. Since we've been isolated, stuck home, have you picked up any new hobbies? Getting into I know you can't work on your golf game at the moment, but
what I'm doing is I have the Babbel app, and so I've been practicing my French and Spanish. I used to be really fluent at French because I live there.
Yeah.
It gets rusty really fast. So anyway, I've been practicing French and Spanish and listening to a lot of new music.
Okay.
And streaming a series. I had read the first book, My Brilliant Friend book. Olean
Yeah.
And I really liked it, but it was quite dark. And so my husband and I have been watching the HBO series that goes along with it, and it's got to be one of the most faithful adaptations I've ever seen. Like beat for beat, they follow the books. And
sometimes books like that surprise you because they just come out of nowhere. It's like nobody heard of the trilogy, and then all of a sudden it's like everybody's reading it. We couldn't keep it on the shelves. That's funny when that happens.
It was recommended to me by Elizabeth George, the mystery author.
Oh, sure,
She lives in Seattle, and she and I are quite good friends. We're actually having a online a Twitter war about what you wear to work.
Oh.
Because I insist that you only have to dress the top half if you're going to have a video conference, and it doesn't matter what's on your lower half. And she insists that she can't even think straight unless she's fully dressed. So
yeah.
been going back and forth about that.
Yeah, and I think I split the difference on that. See, I'm too afraid that I would like stand up to turn on a lamp or something, and see everybody would see my sweatpants or something if I did that. So
yeah,
I think it depends, but it's a weird time.
Oh my God, so weird. Ready for it to be over. The novelty is definitely worn off,
yes.
And I think people are just ready to get back to their lives.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have a kindergartner, and my wife's an editor, so she's working from home here as well. So the two of us trying to work and trying to do kindergarten is a lot. It's a lot. So we're going a little crazy, but can't complain. We're very fortunate, but sometimes it's just like this must end.
Oh my God! If I had a kid at home, oh my God! My granddaughter's home, and my daughter, she's a single mom, and so she's trying to work and have meetings, and Clara is 6 now, and she's running around and needing attention, and I can't, normally I'll meet them at the ferry terminal and bring Clara over, and she'll spend the day with us, but can't even do that anymore because they're in Seattle and I'm on Bainbridge, and we can't even connect. But one thing I did that was a very library-friendly thing is I got on FaceTime, I think it was, either FaceTime or Zoom or something like that, and I read her. I've been reading her like a chapter a day.
Oh, nice. That's great. Yeah, well, that's been I think that's been one positive thing that's come out of all this, is to see the different ways people can adapt their creativity and still reach out and connect with the world. It's that
amazing how resourceful we get.
Yeah, Susan, I so appreciate your time today, and I wish we were sitting across from each other in person, but I'm glad that we could still.
We will make that happen one day.
Absolutely.
I think Danielle is working on scheduling that.
Yep.
And let's hope for the best.
All right. Well, on behalf of the Olean Public Library and my library, the David A. Howe Public Library, thanks again. I wish you all the best and hope to see you soon.
I really appreciate the time. And you guys take care, and I will see you in the fall.
I can't wait. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.